Greetings from Columbia Business School Executive Education here in New York City. My name is Lindsay Machula, and I'm here today with Bob Bontempo for today's webinar, Master Skills for Managerial Success. As you'll see on the next slide, a recording of this webinar will be sent to you. Please follow us on LinkedIn by searching for Columbia Business School Executive Education. And last but not least, please submit your questions using the Q&A box as we move through the presentation. It's my pleasure to introduce Bob Bontempo, the Professor of Business and Management at Columbia Business School, and he's also Faculty Director of many of our executive education programs focused on topics such as leadership, negotiation, and persuasion. Bob's research is also focused on international comparative management, including international negotiations and cultural differences in decision-making. He's also the consulting editor for the Journal of Cross-Cultural Psychology. Bob, we're so excited to have you here today. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Lindsay. I'm very glad to be here. I also want to thank all the folks who took the time out today to join us, and I want to make sure they get a return on the investment of their time. I'm going to try to cover some very practical, useful tips, as well as maybe some thought-provoking ideas. So I can't wait to get started.
Wonderful. And it looks like we have a lot of people coming in from all over the world. I see Mexico City, Brazil. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad to have you here today. We're going to get started today by doing a format where we address some of the questions that you submitted prior to the webinar to really get into the weeds and answer some of the most pressing things on your mind. The first one that I wanted to start with is actually from Laura. And she says, what are the most effective learning experiences we can provide to help leaders grow and develop their soft skills?
Well, that's a really good one. I'll start with a fairly provocative idea. I like to emphasize the importance of self-awareness. You know, there's lots of management books, and you can read the Harvard Business Review and look at case studies of what successful leaders have done. And those are great ways to learn. But I think one of the powerful things about what can happen in the classroom is that we can focus on raising the self-awareness of our participants. And let me share a rather challenging idea. Doctors get better over time. Older doctors are just better than younger doctors. And there's a reason for this that's very important. Doctors gather data through testing. Based on the test results, they form a diagnosis. Based on the diagnosis, they make a treatment plan. And then after they treat the patient gives the doctor the gift of feedback. They either live or they die. And the doctor can learn from that feedback and get better over time. It's called clinical judgment. Now, when I tell people that story and ask them, what's the point? They always say, oh, it's something like, well, you know, we learn from experience, or experience makes us wiser. But that's not the point. My first provocative idea today is experience doesn't teach us anything. We don't learn from experience. We only learn from feedback. The doctors get better because they get feedback about the impact of their treatment of the patient. Now, if you think about your own professional careers, many of you are getting better because you're making high-stakes decisions about how to allocate capital or invest your time and energy in your business. And you see improvements in operating margins or market share, and you can get better. But when it comes to your leadership skills, I'm asking you to be honest and ask yourself, how much feedback are you really getting? When's the last time you left a meeting and somebody pulled you aside and said, you know, your jokes just aren't really that funny? When's the last time somebody came to you after a discussion and said, you know, you didn't really create an inclusive atmosphere in that meeting and people didn't have an authentic chance to speak up? What I'm trying to bring up is, first of all, we only learn when we get feedback about the consequences of the choices we make. But when it comes to our interpersonal skills, most of us don't get any feedback at all. We have a joke at Goldman Sachs, which is that once you make partner, your jokes get a lot funnier and you get a lot better looking. And what I mean by that is, the more senior you become, the more formal power you have, the harder it is for people to give you the kind of honest feedback you would need to grow. So with that big idea on the table, let's talk about what we can do in the classroom. Well, To improve our self-awareness, one of the most powerful tools there is 360-degree feedback. Asking people before they come to one of our sessions at Columbia to fill out a leadership survey, first for themselves and then for the people that report to them, the people that are their peers, and the people they report to. And then we sit them down with a coach and we say, where are the gaps between how you see yourself and how other people see you? Now, remember, it's not a popularity contest. While some of these things might be troubling, what we're here to focus on is what are the gaps in our self-awareness that are going to interfere with my ability to achieve my professional goals? And it's quite eye-opening when people are getting feedback in this confidential, structured process of the 360 tool, that they're not as open to new ideas as they might think, or they're accused of being micromanagers and so forth. So my first point is we can continue to grow and develop as leaders, but only through feedback. Experience doesn't teach us anything. And the more senior we become, the harder it is to get that feedback. And that's one of the reasons these programs we can offer are so transformational for people. It's way more than just reading a leadership book.
That's great. No, feedback is incredibly important. And we do want to go to a next question that is coming from Sophia. Sophia says, how can a leader balance the high demands in leadership positions with effective people management? So this is a big one for so many people who are trying to juggle the two. Bob, can you give your
Yeah.
insights?
Well, thank you. It's actually, I think, a very common transition that so many people that want further leadership education have. They're often technically expert at what they do, and whether it's finance or operations or marketing, they're very good at their job. And they're now on the verge of a promotion where they have to grow and stop managing people and actually become a leader. Now, lots of books have been written on this leadership management distinction, but I'll touch on it by saying that one of the key issues is leaders have to truly delegate. If you're really a leader, you have to inspire people. You have to articulate a vision. You have to harness the energy of all the folks that are working to achieve a common goal. And that's a skill that not all of us have, to inspire people to move their hearts, to focus their energy. But it's really different from management. A lot of the people on this call are probably pretty good people managers. But people managing means setting expectations, communicating those expectations to other people, developing some KPIs or some metrics, holding people accountable for that performance, perhaps managing resources and rewarding the optimal behaviors. Management is hands-on. It's about setting expectations and holding people accountable. Leadership is hands-off. It's about literally giving the kids the car keys and letting them drive. And anybody that's ever had a teenager knows how stressful that moment is, because you're a good driver and you know they're not as good a driver as yourself. So a lot of the folks on this call get stuck because they're really good at their jobs and they would just, quote, rather do it themselves. So one of the things that we can help people with is really becoming self-aware about, what does my role expect from me? If I need to lead, I need to truly delegate. I need to give people a vision and a set of boundaries, but I need to let them apply their skills to solve the problems and to get the work done. And stepping back from that and not micromanaging takes discipline and real focus. But you get tremendous benefits if you can build your team and harness that power. Actually, you get multiplicative synergistic benefits if you can unleash the talent and the creative power of the team you have, if you've done the leadership work of articulating the vision and inspiring them with where you want to go.
Great. Thank you for describing some of the key distinctions there, Bob. I think that's really helpful for people on the call. The third question that I have is from Leo, and Leo says, how can a new manager change their role with direct reports when they were once an individual contributor? Also a very relatable phenomenon as you go up in your career and you make a change. Can you comment on how to manage that from your perspective?
Well, this is a fascinating one, especially I think for the folks on the call today, because I see from the chat, we've got people literally from all over the world. And so there's just no way that my advice is going to apply to everybody universally, because there are really important cultural differences in my answer to this next point. But what I think a lot of the folks at this level face is the challenge that we've been working closely as a member of a team for some years. And now I've gotten a promotion and now I have to lead this team. I want to maintain cordial relationships and high morale, but I also have to accept the responsibility of leading them. And for a lot of folks, they really struggle with this. There are some gender dynamics around this, for women especially, but I have a point of view which I think people can find refreshing. It's a little bit provocative, but the point is, these aren't your friends. This is a professional relationship. And so you can be friendly, you can still be warm and collegial, and there's great value in that. But at some point, it's necessary to establish that this is a formal working relationship, and I have formal authority now, and you have to accept the responsibility that comes with that. Now, a way that I'm trying to keep people engaged on a webinar, and so I have a style of being a little bit provocative. I don't mean to be obnoxious, but I'm a New Yorker, so sometimes that line gets blurry. But here's something that I would like to get people to think about in this regard. Manipulation is not a bad thing. Manipulation is the responsibility of a leader. And when I say it that way, people are often a little bit shocked. But those of you that are parents and have children know that parenting is a manipulative act. You're trying to manipulate your kids to eat more vegetables or put down the phone or not smoke cigarettes. Leadership is a manipulative act. You're trying to manipulate this team of people to hit their KPIs or learn new skills or collaborate across functional lines. Part of my agenda is to get people to accept the responsibility that comes with the promotion. It is now my responsibility to manipulate this group of folks and harness their energy to help us achieve our organizational goals. Now, we can get into the ethics of that, and of course, I'm being a little bit provocative. But the reality is that a lot of people struggle with the fact, especially in some Latin cultures, especially in some Asian cultures, where our relationships are very closely intertwined with our working relationships. And now I've gotten a promotion and I have to balance the expectations they have that I'm still their friend. Well, you're not their friend, you're their boss. And that means accepting the responsibilities that come with setting expectations, holding people accountable for performance. Now, it can still be done in a culturally sensitive and appropriate way. You don't have to be a jerk, but you do have to grow personally. And some of us find that very difficult because it requires a change in self-concept. And again, Lindsay, I hope I'm not pushing too hard on this, but you can't learn that from a book. You can read about it, but to experience it, we have to have an exercise and an experience. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that, Bob. That's very sound advice. I think the next question that we're going to get to is from Juan. He says, what are the most underrated soft skills that can influence key decision makers?
Well, that's a long list. The hard skills of reading a balance sheet and an income statement, financial management, the hard skills of operations, supply chain management. Those are non-negotiable. You have to have those. But I'm guessing for most of the people on this call, they've got those and they can sharpen those skills. What we're focused on, especially at the Columbia Business School, are the softer skills that you need. I would assume that by now almost everybody has read the book Getting to Yes. You've had a negotiations course. You understand that at this level, it's not about walking in and giving people orders. It's about inspiring them. It's about moving them. It's about getting alignment. It's about getting them to buy in. And so that's where the softer skills of inspiration, communication, persuasion become absolutely essential, because a lot of the folks on this call have the formal authority to give people an order. But what you're finding is I'm now at a table where I have other people that don't report to me, and I've got to get them to buy in and implement. So that's where persuasion becomes very important. Now, to give people some practical tools, I have an idea that a lot of folks may not have thought about before, which is there are three fundamental modes that we use when we're interacting with people, and they can be summarized as power, rights, and interests. Sometimes we deal with people based on power, rewards and punishments, threats and promises. I have formal authority, so if you don't do what I want, I will punish you, or if you do what I want, I will reward you. And there's a place for that. Power is a very effective way to get people to do things in the very short run. But it has long-term negative consequences. It doesn't lead to high morale. It doesn't lead to employee engagement or commitment. There's also not power, but rights. What are the rules? What are the norms? What are the expectations? And that's a great way to address people when we share a common set of principles, when we all know what the rules are, when there are laws. But what I'm trying to suggest to folks listening is that at the highest level, the most effective people that I've seen are the ones that engage with other people, not on power or rights, but interests. You get people to do it because it's in their self-interests, and understanding what really motivates people and aligning their true interests with that of the goals of the broader organization is a teachable skill. There's a set of tools. And Lindsay, if we can get very tactical for a minute, let's just talk about one of those tools, which is stakeholder mapping. I've had the benefit, since I've been at the Columbia Business School, to be a coach and advisor to very senior executives in the public sector, like the United Nations and the State Department. And I've also had the opportunity to do that sort of work with Wall Street executives and Fortune 100 C-suite executives. And there's a real difference between the two psychologically that I can share with folks, which is that the public sector folks have a political skill that is both observable and teachable. And it starts with being very realistic. When you have a major initiative, when you have to get buy-in, when you have to drive an agenda, and you don't have formal authority over a lot of the people that you're dealing with. One of these soft skills is, frankly, being a better politician. And it starts with asking, not who do I need to talk to get this thing done? Or, whose favor do I have to curry? The private sector mentality is, who do I have to talk to solve my problem? But the public sector political skill is, let's be very thoughtful and strategic. Who are all the different stakeholders who, from their point of view, could conceivably feel they need to be informed of or involved in this initiative? Be as inclusive as possible in the short run, even though it takes a little more time. And then let's sort those stakeholders into a map. How supportive or opposed are they to my initiative? And how relatively powerful or weak are they? And now we're building a chessboard, and I can teach people to play political chess with their institutional challenges. By then, once we build the chessboard, where are all the players? How can we then move them? Who can I engage with? Whose influence can I harness to build up my political base and get people off the fence, literally harnessing the power of peer pressure. So in such a short session, it's hard to be more detailed than that. But one of the soft skills is just embracing the reality that your careers are about to become much more political. And that's not a dirty word. When you have formal authority, you can give people orders. But a lot of the people listening on this call are struggling with the transition to, I now have to be more political. I have to engage people. I have to persuade people. But we have a set of fairly practical tools, and this stakeholder map is one of those that helps us visualize the challenge we're in and become more effective at playing the chess that we need to drive our agenda.
Great, thank you. I love that analogy of the chessboard, putting people into their positions. So that's great. The next question is from Deepak, and he says, how do you effectively manage team members who don't report to you but are instrumental to achieving your organizational goals?
Well, this is tough. Again, when we're dealing with a functional hierarchy, a lot of the old Harvard Business Review case studies are focused on, giving people orders, alignment of the organization, and moving up and down the functional hierarchy. But the modern world is much more matrixed. It's much more peer influence. We have stakeholders that not only do they not report to us, they're not even members of our organization. And I have to create value and achieve my goals by harnessing all of this, all of their different agendas. That's fundamentally a motivational question. And there's lots of books on motivation, but one very practical tool we can give people is just a set of very specific questions. When I need to get people to do something, I have to ask, What are they actually incentivized by? What value is in it for them? What do they want? I then have to link that to two other very basic questions. Do they feel they can actually achieve it? If I set a target or a goal, do they feel they have the tools and the resources and the capability to achieve it? Can I do it? And then secondly, do they see a link or a line of sight between hitting that target, achieving the performance objective that you set, and getting the reward? Is there trust in the system? Are they visible? Do they have evidence that you followed through on your promises before? Do they trust that you'll help them achieve their goals? So influencing people over whom you don't have formal authority is more than giving orders, because that's not going to work. It's about figuring out what actually motivates them. And there are some very practical psychological tools that we have that can help with that. It's, do they feel they can do it? Do they trust that if they do it, they'll get the reward? And are you actually offering rewards that matter to them? Let me just leave with a very practical tool. One of the most common psychological mistakes people make is projecting onto other people that what's important to us is important to them. And we have people from all over the world, and this is one of those cases where cultural differences really show up. Some people value autonomy and independence and freedom. Other people want to be members of a team. Some people want individual acknowledgement and rewards. Other people find that uncomfortable. They want group rewards. So training people to truly have insight into what motivates other people is a teachable skill, but it doesn't come naturally.
Thank you for going over that and talking about that distinction, Bob. We had addressed all of the pre-submitted questions, and now I want to give a little bit of space to answer some live questions that have been coming through. We have over 300 people on today's webinar, which is amazing. And so naturally, people have questions. I know that there have been some coming through the Q&A as well as the chat. If you don't mind just popping your questions in the Q&A, that will help us address them faster. Bob, do you want to kick off with one of the top questions that you have on the list?
Let's take a look. I see one asking about book references. And, that's a great place to start. Lindsay, can we offer folks, when this is over, a list of a couple of the books that I feel are key? I mean, I assume that everybody's read Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher. It's the best book on negotiation ever written. Robert Cialdini has written a book called Influence, which is a really nice summary of the interpersonal skills to influence people's behavior. And I can't resist pointing out that I'm in the process of writing what I feel will be the third in that sequence, a book on the psychology of persuasion and how to change people's minds. But we'll share those.
Yeah, the recording, you can look for a list of the book references that Bob had just listed.
Nice. I'm taking a look through all these great chat questions. I see somebody loved Cialdini's book, and it's true. Here's a great one. Should you bring up a deep conflict with your peer to your common boss? Thank you for that question. I have a different take on this. One of the most important soft skills you can teach people is that conflict resolution is an outdated idea. There's always going to be conflict at work because we always have multiple conflicting objectives. Different people want different things. Teaching people not conflict resolution, but conflict management is a very important growth step. Giving people the tools to have uncomfortable conversations. So, of course, this question, should I bring up deep conflict with my peer to a common boss? That might be the right thing to do. But I'd actually prefer you develop the skills to bring it up with the person you're having the conflict with. We have such limited time. I wish I had an hour just on this question, but very briefly, giving you the skills to go to that person with whom you're having a conflict and say, first of all, let's be very practical. You start by saying, hey, there's something I'd like to talk with you about. Is this a good time, or could we schedule something? Asking their permission to create the environment. Then saying, there's an issue that's been bothering me. And to be very tactical, we give people the XYZ formula. You don't accuse them of being closed-minded. You don't accuse them of sabotaging your career. You say XYZ. When you do X, I feel Y, and Z happens. The when you do X is critical because you have to focus on a behavior, not a trait. You don't call somebody closed-minded. You say a behavior, like when you finish my sentences before I'm done speaking. When you don't show up punctually for my meetings. You don't say you're disrespectful, you say a behavior, because behaviors can be changed, personality cannot. And then you say, I feel Y, because my feelings can't be disputed. Then you say Z happens, we are less productive, we miss our deadlines, our customers aren't served well. So XYZ is a teachable formula. And I know this sounds a little bit like psychotherapy, but in the spirit of our call today, one of the soft skills we can train people in is how to be better at conflict management. We're never all going to get along. But instead of ratting somebody out to my boss and asking my boss to fix the problem, personal growth means giving you the skills to engage with people that you're not getting along with. Now, there's all kinds of other tools. There's psychological frameworks. There's better self-understanding to understand how we're different from other people. And I'd love to go into that, but I see, Lindsay, we're running short on time.
Yes, we have probably time for about one more question. Bob, are you open to, I just found one. Do you mind if I read it off to you?
Please.
So this was interesting from Maxim. He said, what are some of the successful techniques to solicit feedback across the organization? Do you want to do this at the same level or level up?
Okay. Again, I'm not trying to be offensive, but I need to be rather provocative on this point. Everybody listening to me thinks it's not them. They think it's the other guy. But I'm warning you, the more senior you become, the harder it is to get honest upward feedback. Once you have formal authority over people, they are lying to you all day long. And I don't mean malicious lying. I mean impression management lying. They're trying to tell you what they think you want to hear. It becomes increasingly difficult to get that kind of feedback. Now, some of you are lucky enough to have a mentor. Now, a mentor is defined as somebody that has an adequate opportunity to observe the way you work, but you don't have a formal direct line reporting to them, so they can honestly be candid with you. Some of you are naive and believe that as you grow and achieve more formal authority, the people that were your buddies as at a junior level are going to continue to be honest with you. And that's just hard. All you have to do is take a look around most organizations and you realize that senior people are often out of touch. And it's increasingly a problem because it's harder for them to get the kind of honest feedback. So we need formal mechanisms. You need a structured 360 process where people are promised confidentiality so they can be open. And give you the kind of honest feedback that you need to grow and develop. It just doesn't come intuitively. You can't just take somebody out for coffee or a beer and expect them to open up. And you say, look, what gets said here stays here. I won't hold it against you. The world just doesn't work that way. It's increasingly difficult the more senior you become. You need a formal tool.
Great, thank you. One more question?
Please.
Somebody who didn't submit their name did ask a question here that I thought was interesting. How can a leader balance strategic decision-making with the need to inspire and motivate their team? So you touched on this a little bit, but maybe to give them some additional food for thought.
Well, great question. The more senior we become, the more responsible we are, not just for the implementation of goals, but strategic decision-making, identifying opportunities, choosing, making hard calls where the objective data is not available. There's a complexity here, which is, and very briefly, I'll make a point. The more that you involve people in that decision process, the more likely they are to be committed to sharing the outcome. So there's a rule of human behavior, which is that participation in the process leads to commitment to the outcome. So I know you want to go off in a room with your smart peers and make a good decision and then roll it out and tell people what to do. And there are conditions where that's the right thing to do. But something I want to leave people with is the law of human behavior, that participation in a process leads people to be committed to the outcome and therefore more likely to follow through. So take the time up front to get people engaged. You want to manage their expectations. I'm not promising I'm going to do what you tell me. This is not necessarily a democracy, but I want your input and I value your thinking. And when you take that step, it makes people more engaged and willing to help you implement.
Great, thank you. So we are at time. I know a lot of great questions came in. We did our best to address as many as we could. Bob, I wanted to say thank you for today's presentation. For anybody that's interested in connecting with Bob, we did drop his LinkedIn into the chat, so feel free to connect. Bob, we're looking forward to your upcoming program, the Emerging Leader Development Program, taking place this June 23 to 27 here in New York City. Be sure to check your inbox for some more information about Bob's programming, as well as the link to this webinar. Will also include some book references that you requested. On behalf of Columbia Business School Executive Education, we'd like to thank you so much for joining us here today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk soon. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.